The sight of Wendy Kramer's face pressed against my living room window while I was trying to enjoy my hot chocolate should have been the first warning that Christmas Eve was about to get complicated. I set down my mug and walked to the front door, already knowing what was coming. In the 2 years since I moved into Pine Ridge Estates in Boulder, Colorado, Wendy had made it her personal mission to ensure every blade of grass was exactly 2 inches tall, and every mailbox was the approved shade of forest green. As HOA president, she wielded her clipboard like a sword and her laminated rulebook like a shield. "Kevin Ingram," she announced before I even opened the door fully. "I need to speak with you about tonight's activities." The snow was coming down heavy now, those big fat flakes that made everything look like a Christmas card. I had been planning my annual Christmas Eve bonfire for weeks, and nothing was going to stop me, not even Wendy with her pursed lips and sensible shoes. "Evening, Wendy. Merry Christmas to you too. Do not try to charm your way out of this," she said, clutching her phone and that damned clipboard. "I received your notification about having a bonfire tonight, and I am here to inform you that it violates Section 12, subsection 4 of our HOA bylaws." I leaned against the doorframe, feeling the cold air mix with the warmth from inside. "Wendy, I checked the bylaws 3 times. Outdoor fires are permitted during winter months as long as they're contained, supervised, and at least 50 feet from any structure. My fire pit is 60 feet from my house and 70 from the property line." Her jaw tightened. "The spirit of the rule clearly indicates that such activities should be modest and brief. Based on the size of that fire pit you have set up, this is neither modest nor brief. The rule does not mention size or duration. Trust me, I read it carefully. I am the president of this HOA, and I am telling you that this bonfire is not acceptable. If you proceed with this reckless activity, I will have no choice but to call the authorities." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that it was Christmas Eve and that arguing with Wendy was like arguing with a brick wall. A brick wall that could fine you $200 for having the wrong color holiday lights. "Wendy, my family has been doing Christmas Eve bonfires for 3 generations. My grandfather started the tradition in Minnesota, my father continued it in Wyoming, and I am continuing it here. It is safe, it is legal, and it is happening. Now, if you would like to join us for hot cider and s'mores, you are welcome to stay. Otherwise, I have preparations to finish." Her face went from pink to red. "You are making a terrible mistake, Kevin, a terrible mistake." She turned on her heel and marched back through the snow to her house 3 doors down. I watched her go, then looked at the thermometer on my porch. 28 degrees and dropping. Perfect bonfire weather. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Marcus. "Still on for tonight. Rachel and the kids are excited." I texted back confirmation and went to finish setting up. The fire pit was a custom-built steel ring, 8 feet in diameter with proper ventilation and a spark screen. I had spent 3 months designing it and another month building it. Around the pit, I had arranged log benches in a circle, each one cleared of snow and covered with waterproof cushions. String lights hung from posts I had installed specifically for gatherings like this, creating a warm glow that reflected off the falling snow. By 6 o'clock, the fire was roaring. The dry oak logs I had been seasoning since September caught quickly, and soon I had a proper blaze going. The heat pushed back against the cold night air, creating a bubble of warmth that extended about 15 feet from the pit. The snow that fell near the fire melted before it could reach the flames, and the spark screen kept any embers contained. Marcus arrived first with his wife Rachel and their 3 kids. 8-year-old Tommy immediately ran to the fire with wide eyes, while his sisters, Jennifer and Sarah, were more interested in the hot chocolate station I had set up on a fold-out table. "This is incredible," Rachel said, handing me a covered dish of her famous 7-layer dip. "I cannot believe you built all of this." "Wait until you see what else he has planned," Marcus said, gesturing to the small speaker system I had set up, quietly playing Christmas music. My best friend Derek showed up next with his girlfriend, then the couple from across the street who I had invited last week, and before long, I had about 20 people gathered around the fire. The atmosphere was exactly what I had hoped for. Warm, friendly, with the kind of easy conversation that only happens when people are comfortable and happy. That was when I saw the red and blue lights. The police cruiser pulled up slowly, its lights painting the snow in alternating colors. My stomach sank, but I kept my cool. I had not done anything wrong, and I knew it. Still, having the cops show up at your Christmas Eve party was never a good look. Officer Martinez stepped out first, followed by his partner, Officer Chen. I recognized them both from the station. Martinez had been on the force for about 5 years, Chen for maybe 3. They both looked cold and annoyed at being called out on Christmas Eve. "Evening, officers," I said, walking over to meet them before they reached my guests. "I am guessing Wendy Kramer called this in." Martinez sighed, his breath creating a small cloud in the cold air. "Chief Ingram, I should have known when we got the call about a dangerous bonfire that it would be you." The confused look on Chen's face was priceless. She looked at me, then at Martinez, then back at me. "Wait, this is Chief Ingram, our fire chief." "The same," I said. "And before you ask, yes, everything here is completely up to code and then some." "Would you like me to walk you through the safety measures?" Martinez rubbed his forehead. "The caller said you were operating an unsafe open flame during hazardous winter conditions and endangering the neighborhood. The caller would be wrong on all counts. Come take a look." I led them over to the fire pit, explaining each safety feature. The steel construction that prevented ground fires, the spark screen that contained embers, the 3 fire extinguishers positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, the cleared zone extending 20 feet in every direction, the weather monitoring app on my phone showing wind speeds and direction, the fact that I had personally inspected every aspect of the setup before lighting the first match. Chen was taking notes, though I could tell it was more out of habit than necessity. Martinez just looked tired. "So legally speaking," Chen said, "there is nothing wrong here." "Nothing whatsoever," I confirmed. "I am the fire chief for Boulder District 3. I teach fire safety courses. I have investigated hundreds of fire scenes and testified in court about proper fire management. This bonfire is probably the safest recreational fire in the entire county right now." Marcus called out from the fire. "Officers, we have hot chocolate and cookies if you want some before you go." Martinez smiled for the first time since arriving. "Appreciate it, but we need to get back to the station." "Chief, sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve." "Not your fault. Just doing your job." As they walked back to their cruiser, I saw Wendy's front door open. She must have been watching, waiting to see me get cited or shut down. Instead, she got to watch the officers wave goodbye and drive off without taking any action. I should have known that would not be the end of it. The party continued for another hour, with more neighbors stopping by. Even some people from the next street over had seen the glow and wandered over to see what was happening. I kept the fire at a safe level, added logs as needed, and made sure everyone stayed a safe distance back. The kids roasted marshmallows under careful supervision, and the adults swapped stories and enjoyed the peaceful snowfall. Around 8 o'clock, I noticed Wendy marching across the snow again. This time she had her phone up, recording everything. "This is still happening," she said loudly, making sure her phone captured everything. Despite my warnings, despite the clear danger to this community, Kevin Ingram continues to operate this bonfire. Wendy, the police already came. They found no violations. Those officers clearly did not understand the severity of the situation. I have called the fire department directly. They will shut this down. My brother tried not to laugh. Several of my guests who knew my position were actively biting their lips to keep from commenting. I just nodded calmly. That is your right, Wendy. Feel free to call whoever you need to call. She stalked off, still recording, muttering about reckless endangerment and property values. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from the non-emergency fire department line. I also had 2 texts from my deputy chief, Linda. Did you piss off your HOA president? The first one read. She is calling every number she can find demanding we shut down your Christmas bonfire. This is hilarious, said the second. I texted back. Let me know if this becomes an actual problem. Already handled. Told her that Fire Chief Ingram's property has been inspected and approved. She threatened to call the mayor. I wished her luck. The mayor was my uncle, but I decided not to mention that to Wendy. Some surprises were better saved for later. The bonfire wound down around 9:30. Families with young kids headed home first, thanking me for the invitation and asking if I would do it again next year. By 10, only Marcus, Rachel, and Derek remained, helping me clean up and make sure the fire died down properly. You know she is not going to let this go, Marcus said, dumping out the water cooler into the snow. I know. Wendy has made it her life's mission to control every aspect of this neighborhood, but she is going to learn that not everything falls under HOA jurisdiction. Rachel folded up one of the tables. What can she actually do, though? You followed all the rules. The HOA rules, yes, but people like Wendy do not care about rules when they do not get their way. She will find some other angle to attack from. I was more right than I knew. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to find a certified letter shoved through my mail slot. It must have been hand-delivered because there was no postal service on Christmas. I opened it with my coffee still brewing, already knowing it was from Wendy. The letter was 3 pages long, typed in formal business language, and outlined a list of supposed violations. According to Wendy's interpretation, I had violated noise ordinances, created a public nuisance, damaged common area property by having guests park on the street, and operated a commercial gathering without proper permits. Every single claim was either false or absurd. The noise ordinance for residential areas was 70 decibels until 10 p.m. We had been playing Christmas music at maybe 50 decibels and had wrapped up by 9:30. A gathering of friends on private property was not a public nuisance. The street parking was completely legal, as our neighborhood had no parking restrictions. And calling a Christmas party a commercial gathering was such a stretch that I actually laughed out loud. The letter concluded with a demand that I pay a fine of $1,000 and agree in writing to never host another outdoor fire on my property. I took a picture of the letter and texted it to my lawyer friend, Greg. Merry Christmas. Can she do any of this? I wrote. Greg responded 20 minutes later. Merry Christmas to you too. And no, this is complete nonsense. Save all documentation. If she tries to actually enforce this, we can countersue for harassment. I filed the letter away and tried to enjoy the rest of my Christmas. I had plans to video call with my parents in Wyoming and then head over to Marcus's house for dinner. But the letter bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I was worried about the fine, but because it showed how far Wendy was willing to go. The day after Christmas, I got a call from my deputy chief, Linda. Kevin, we have a problem. Well, you have a problem. Someone filed a formal complaint with the county about your property. I sat up from my couch where I had been watching football. What kind of complaint? Fire hazard. They claimed you are storing flammable materials in unsafe conditions and operating fire equipment without proper oversight. The county is required to investigate any formal complaint, so I have to send someone out. I am really sorry about this. Linda, do not apologize. Just doing your job. When do you want to come by? I can swing by tomorrow morning around 10 if that works. I will bring Carter with me so this is officially documented as a full inspection. Sounds good. The property is clean, so there will not be anything to find. But the next morning, when Linda and Carter arrived in the department's inspection vehicle, they found exactly what I expected them to find. Nothing. My garage was organized and well maintained. The fire pit had been cleaned out and properly covered. The propane tank for my grill was stored according to regulations. Even my fireplace had been recently cleaned and inspected. Linda took photos of everything, and Carter filled out the inspection forms with meticulous detail. When they were done, Linda handed me a copy of the report. Clean as a whistle, as expected. This complaint was clearly filed in bad faith. I am going to make a note of that in my report to the county. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate you coming out, even though I know this is a waste of your time. Carter spoke up, a younger guy who had joined the department about a year ago. Chief, if you do not mind me asking, why is this person targeting you so hard? Because I did not bow down and cancel my Christmas bonfire when she demanded it. People like Wendy see any resistance to their authority as a personal attack. She is not going to stop until either she gets what she wants or something forces her to back off. Linda nodded. I have dealt with a lot of HOAs in my career. The worst ones are always run by people who have never had real authority in their lives, so they abuse whatever tiny bit of power they get. After they left, I decided it was time to go on the offensive. I pulled out the HOA bylaws, all 87 pages of them, and started reading. Really rating. If Wendy wanted to play by the rules, then I was going to learn every single rule better than she knew them. What I found was fascinating. The bylaws had been written 15 years ago when the neighborhood was first developed, and they had not been updated since. There were provisions in there that nobody followed anymore because they were outdated or impractical. But more importantly, there were rules about how the HOA itself had to operate. For instance, the HOA president was elected by the board members, but the board members were supposed to be elected by the homeowners in an annual meeting. According to the bylaws, this meeting had to happen every January, with at least 2 weeks' notice given to all homeowners. I checked the HOA records, which were supposed to be available to any homeowner upon request. It took 3 emails and 1 certified letter, but I finally got copies of the last 5 years of meeting minutes. There had not been an annual homeowner meeting in 4 years. Wendy had been re-electing herself and her board without any input from the actual homeowners. The last meeting that had been held according to proper procedure was when Wendy first took over as president, and even that one had been sparsely attended. This was exactly the ammunition I needed. I spent the next few days quietly reaching out to neighbors. Not the ones who had come to my bonfire, though I knew they would support me. I wanted to talk to the people who had been silent, the ones who paid their HOA dues and kept their heads down because dealing with Wendy was too exhausting. What I discovered was eye-opening. Nearly everyone had a story. The couple on Maple Street had been fined for having the wrong shade of white paint on their shutters. The retired teacher on Oak Drive had been cited for having her garden gnomes too close to the sidewalk. The young family who had moved in last spring had been threatened with legal action because their toddler's toys were visible from the street. Every single person I talked to was fed up with Wendy's tyranny, but nobody wanted to be the one to stand up to her. They had seen how she reacted to resistance, and they did not want that spotlight on themselves. What if we all stood up together? I asked Mrs. Patterson, a widow in her 70s who had lived in Pine Ridge Estate since it was built. She looked at me with tired eyes. "Young man, I have been dealing with bullies my entire life. The only way to stop them is to take away their power. But Wendy has the board in her pocket and they have the HOA funds. She can drag out legal battles until everyone gives up. Not if we remove her first. According to the bylaws, we can call a special homeowner meeting if we get signatures from 25% of the residents. There are 68 homes in Pine Ridge Estates, which means we need 17 signatures." Mrs. Patterson sat up a little straighter. "You really think you can get 17 people willing to go against Wendy? I think I can get 40. Over the next week, I walked the neighborhood with a petition. The document was simple. It called for a special meeting of all homeowners to discuss HOA leadership and vote on the current board. It did not specifically call for Wendy's removal, though everyone who signed it knew that was the implication. By January 5th, I had 43 signatures, more than enough to force the meeting. I submitted the petition to Wendy via certified mail, as required by the bylaws. I also sent copies to each of the 4 board members, just to make sure everyone was properly notified. Wendy's response came in the form of an email sent to every homeowner in the neighborhood. "It has come to my attention that a disgruntled homeowner is attempting to undermine the stability and effectiveness of your HOA board. This action stems from a personal vendetta after said homeowner was rightfully cited for dangerous and illegal activity. I urge all homeowners to ignore this petition and trust in the leadership that has kept our property values high and our neighborhood safe." I almost admired the boldness of the lie. I had never been cited because there was nothing to cite. But Wendy was gambling that most people would not fact-check her claims. I sent my own email to the neighborhood, keeping it brief and factual. I outlined the bylaws requirement for annual elections, noted that these had not been held, and attached scanned copies of the meeting minutes proving it. I did not attack Wendy personally. I did not need to. The facts spoke for themselves. The meeting was scheduled for January 15th at 7 p.m. in the community center that sat at the entrance to our neighborhood. According to the bylaws, Wendy had to allow the meeting to happen, though she could set the date and time within a reasonable window. The 2 weeks leading up to the meeting were tense. Wendy sent 3 more neighborhood-wide emails, each one escalating in tone. She claimed I was trying to eliminate all rules and turn Pine Ridge Estates into a lawless disaster. She said property values would plummet if I got my way. She even suggested that my real goal was to run illegal businesses out of my home, using the Bonfire complaint as evidence of my disregard for neighborhood safety. Several of my supporters started getting individual letters threatening fines for minor or imaginary violations. The message was clear. Side with Kevin, and Wendy would make your life difficult, but the intimidation tactics backfired. Every new threat just made more people angry. By the time the meeting date arrived, I had commitments from at least 30 homeowners to attend and vote for new leadership. The community center was packed. Wendy had arranged the room with a table at the front where she and the 4 board members sat, facing rows of chairs for the homeowners. It was a power move, putting herself in the position of authority. But the number of people who showed up clearly rattled her. I counted 52 residents in attendance, representing over 75% of the homes in Pine Ridge Estates. This was unprecedented. Wendy called the meeting to order, banging a gavel she had brought from home. This special meeting of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association has been called due to a petition submitted by Kevin Ingram. Before we proceed, I want to remind everyone that this board has served this community faithfully for 5 years and that any changes to leadership should be carefully considered. I raised my hand. Point of order. According to the bylaws, you have not served for 5 years. You were elected to a 1-year term 5 years ago, and that term expired 4 years ago when no annual election was held. Wendy's face flushed. The board voted to extend our terms due to lack of interest from the community. The board does not have the authority to extend terms. Only the homeowners can elect board members, and only at a properly called annual meeting. This is outlined in Section 3 of the bylaws. One of the board members, a nervous man named Harold who lived at the far end of the neighborhood, raised his hand. Actually, Wendy, Kevin is right. I brought this up 2 years ago, and you said we would address it. Wendy shot him a look that could have melted steel. We are addressing it now, Harold. That is what this meeting is for. Mrs. Patterson stood up, her voice carrying across the room despite her age. I move that we vote to dissolve the current board immediately and hold elections for all positions tonight. Second, called out at least 5 people simultaneously. Wendy looked panicked. That is not on the agenda. I stood up. According to the bylaws, any motion that receives a second must be voted on by the homeowners present. You do not have the authority to block this vote. For a long moment, Wendy just stared at me. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. She was trying to find a way out, some procedural trick that would let her maintain control. But there was not one. She had been caught and she knew it. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. All in favor of dissolving the current board. A forest of hands went up. I counted quickly. At least 45 out of 52. Opposed, Wendy and 2 of the board members raised their hands. Harold abstained, and the 4th board member, a woman named Grace, voted in favor of dissolution. The motion passes, I said. The board is dissolved. We now need to elect a new board consisting of a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, plus 3 at-large members. The next hour was chaotic but productive. Nominations were made, brief speeches were given, and votes were held. When the dust settled, Mrs. Patterson had been elected president with overwhelming support. Derek's girlfriend Amanda, who was an accountant, became treasurer. A retired military officer named Thomas became vice president. I was elected to one of the at-large positions, not because I wanted it, but because enough people insisted that I should have a voice in the new leadership. Wendy and her supporters left before the meeting was officially adjourned, but not before Wendy made one final declaration. You people have no idea what you have done. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership, and when it does, do not come crying to me. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. Mrs. Patterson took her position at the front table, looking more energized than I had seen her since I moved in. Well, now that the drama is over, let us talk about how we are actually going to run this HOA. The conversation that followed was refreshing. We talked about updating the bylaws to be more reasonable, eliminating fines for minor aesthetic differences, focusing HOA attention on actual community needs like maintaining the common areas and organizing neighborhood events, creating a transparent budgeting process so everyone knew where their dues were going. By the time we wrapped up at 10 p.m., I felt genuinely hopeful about the future of Pine Ridge Estates. That hope lasted exactly 3 days. On January 18th, I received a summons to small claims court. Wendy was suing me for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $15,000 in damages, which was just under the small claims court limit. I called Greg immediately. "This is absurd," he said after reading through the complaint. "She does not have a case. You are going to win this easily." "But I still have to go through the process, right? I still have to show up to court and defend myself." "Unfortunately, yes. Anyone can file a lawsuit. Winning it is another matter. But Kevin, here is the thing. If this goes to court and the judge finds that her suit is frivolous, you can countersue for legal fees and court costs. Wendy might be digging herself into a deeper hole." "When is the court date?" "March 3rd. You have plenty of time to prepare, but honestly, there is not much to prepare. Just bring all your documentation. The HOA bylaws, the meeting minutes, the timeline of events. Let the facts speak for themselves." I agreed, but I could not shake the feeling that this was just the opening move in a longer game. People like Wendy did not give up after one loss. They escalated. The next incident confirmed my suspicions. In early February, I came home from the station to find my mailbox lying on the ground, bent and damaged. It looked like someone had hit it with a bat or driven into it deliberately. I checked my security camera, a system I had installed after the first confrontation with Wendy, and found that the footage from the previous night had been corrupted. 2 days later, someone dumped a bag of garbage on my front lawn in the middle of the night. Again, the security footage was mysteriously corrupted. A week after that, I got a notice from the city that someone had filed a complaint about my property being a health hazard due to accumulated waste. When the inspector came out, there was nothing to see. My property was clean. But the complaint meant I had to take time off work to meet with the inspector and prove that nothing was wrong. I knew it was Wendy, but I could not prove it. She was smart enough not to leave evidence, and she was careful enough not to make direct threats. The harassment continued through February. My work truck got keyed. Someone cut the lock on my storage shed and left the door open, though nothing was stolen. I started getting signed up for spam mailing lists and random magazine subscriptions. Someone even called in a false tip to animal control, claiming I was keeping aggressive dogs in my backyard. I did not own any dogs. Each incident by itself was minor, but together they created a pattern of targeted harassment. I documented everything, saved all the notices and complaints, and kept my lawyer updated. But without proof that Wendy was behind it, there was not much I could do except wait for her to slip up. The court date arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. I took the day off work and met Greg at the Boulder County Courthouse an hour before the hearing. Wendy was already there, dressed in a conservative suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She had hired a lawyer, a slick-looking guy in his 40s who probably cost more than her entire claim. Small claims court was less formal than regular court, but it was still intimidating if you were not used to it. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Alvarez, called our case at 9:30. Wendy's lawyer went first, laying out a narrative that painted me as a dangerous nuisance who had waged a campaign to destroy Wendy's reputation and force her out of the HOA. He claimed that my Christmas bonfire had been deliberately provocative, that I had manipulated other homeowners into supporting me through lies and intimidation, and that the stress of my actions had caused Wendy significant emotional harm. It was all very dramatic and almost entirely fiction. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I presented the timeline of events, starting with Wendy's attempt to shut down my legal bonfire. I showed the police report confirming no violations. I presented the fire department inspection showing my property was safe. I brought copies of the HOA bylaws with the relevant sections highlighted, proving that no annual elections had been held. I even had statements from other homeowners describing their own experiences with Wendy's overreach. Judge Alvarez listened to everything, asked a few clarifying questions, and then sat back in her chair. "Mrs. Kramer, I am going to be very direct with you. This lawsuit is without merit. Mr. Ingram did not defame you. He exercised his rights under your HOA bylaws to call for a meeting and hold elections. The fact that you did not like the outcome does not make his actions harassment. As for emotional distress, you have provided no evidence beyond your own testimony that Mr. Ingram's actions caused you any quantifiable harm." Wendy's lawyer tried to interject, but Judge Alvarez held up her hand. "I am not finished. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, it appears that you, Mrs. Kramer, have been the one engaging in harassment. The pattern of complaints, false reports, and property damage that Mr. Ingram has documented suggests retaliatory behavior. I am dismissing your claim with prejudice, which means you cannot refile it. Additionally, I am awarding Mr. Ingram his court costs and attorney fees. Do you understand?" Wendy's face had gone from red to white. "Your Honor, I was simply trying to protect my neighborhood from a dangerous individual. Mrs. Kramer, Mr. Ingram is a fire chief with an impeccable safety record. Your characterization of him as dangerous is not supported by any evidence. This case is dismissed." The gavel came down and it was over. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Greg was grinning. "That went even better than I expected. Judge Alvarez does not mess around. Do you think this is the end of it? Honestly, I hope so. But people like Wendy sometimes do not know when to quit. Keep documenting everything, and if she tries anything else, we will have a strong case for a restraining order." I went back to work, thinking that maybe Greg was wrong. Maybe getting publicly shut down by a judge would be enough to make Wendy back off. I should have known better. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in late March, I was at the station finishing up some paperwork when I got a call from Mrs. Patterson. "Kevin, we have a problem. Wendy is trying to contest the election results. She filed something with the county claiming the vote was invalid." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "On what grounds?" "She is claiming that the meeting was not properly noticed according to the bylaws, so any votes taken were invalid. Her lawyer sent a letter to all the board members threatening legal action if we do not voluntarily step down. That is ridiculous." The meeting was called according to the petition process, which is specifically outlined in the bylaws. We followed every rule. I know that, and you know that. But Wendy is arguing that the 2-week notice period was not sufficient because some homeowners did not check their mail in time. I thought about it for a moment. "Mrs. Patterson, can you call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow? I think it is time we took a closer look at the HOA's finances. If Wendy is spending association money to fund these frivolous lawsuits, the homeowners have a right to know." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You think she has been misusing HOA funds?" "I think someone who is this desperate to maintain control might have reasons beyond just ego. It is worth investigating." The emergency board meeting was held Sunday afternoon at Mrs. Patterson's house. All 7 board members attended, along with Amanda, our treasurer. Amanda had been trying to get access to the HOA's bank accounts and financial records for 2 months, but the bank had been giving her the runaround because Wendy was still listed as an authorized signer. "I finally got the statements yesterday," Amanda said, spreading papers across Mrs. Patterson's dining room table. "And we have some serious problems." Over the next hour, Amanda walked us through what she had found. The HOA had been collecting about $200 per month from each of the 68 homes, which should have meant over $16,000 per month in revenue. Annual revenue should have been around $200,000. The account balance was $8,000. "Where did the money go?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her face pale. Amanda pointed to a series of withdrawals. Some of it went to legitimate expenses, landscaping, snow removal, insurance. But there are also payments to a legal firm for over $40,000 in the last year alone. Consulting fees to a property management company for $30,000. And then there are these. She pointed to a series of cash withdrawals, each one just under $5,000, spaced about 2 weeks apart. "Those cash withdrawals total $96,000 over 3 years, Amanda said quietly. "There is no documentation for what they were used for." The room went silent. We were all thinking the same thing, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Thomas, our vice president, cleared his throat. "Are we looking at embezzlement?" "I am an accountant, not a lawyer," Amanda said. "But if I saw these records from a client, I would strongly advise them to contact the authorities. This is not just poor bookkeeping. This is a pattern of unexplained cash withdrawals with no supporting documentation." I pulled out my phone. "I know a detective in the financial crimes unit. Let me make a call." Detective Sarah Brennan was someone I had worked with on several arson investigations where insurance fraud was suspected. She was thorough, professional, and did not mess around when it came to financial crimes. She answered on the third ring. "Kevin, please tell me you are not calling to tell me someone is burning down buildings for insurance money on a Sunday." "Different kind of fraud, Sarah. Potential embezzlement from an HOA. The treasurer just found evidence of nearly $100,000 in unexplained cash withdrawals over 3 years. Her tone shifted immediately. "How much evidence do you have?" "Bank statements, bylaws showing who had authority to make withdrawals, and a timeline of increasingly erratic behavior from the person we suspect." "Can you meet with us tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the station? Bring everything you have." The meeting with Detective Brennan went smoothly. Amanda had prepared a complete financial analysis, highlighting every questionable transaction. I provided background on the conflicts with Wendy, including the dismissed lawsuit and the pattern of harassment. Mrs. Patterson brought copies of all HOA meeting minutes, showing that no financial reports had been presented to homeowners in years. Brennan took notes, asked detailed questions, and photographed every document. "This is going to take some time to investigate properly," she said. "I will need to subpoena the bank records to get the full picture, and I will want to interview Mrs. Kramer. But based on what you have shown me, there is definitely probable cause to open a case." "What happens now?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Now you go home and do not discuss this with anyone outside this room. I do not want Mrs. Kramer getting tipped off and having time to destroy evidence or move money around. Give me 2 weeks to build the case, and then we will see where we stand." 2 weeks felt like 2 years. I went about my normal routine, working shifts at the fire station, attending board meetings, trying not to think about what might be happening with the investigation. Wendy had gone quiet, which worried me more than her usual aggressive behavior. She had not sent any more threatening letters, had not filed any new complaints, had not shown up at any HOA events. Then, on a Thursday morning in mid-April, I was sitting in my office at the station when I got a text from Detective Brennan. "Arrest warrant issued. Moving on it today. Thought you would want to know." My phone rang a few hours later. It was Mrs. Patterson, and she was crying. "They arrested her, Kevin. The police came to her house this morning and arrested Wendy. There are 3 police cars on our street right now, and they are searching her house." Half the neighborhood is standing outside watching. What is going on? I drove home immediately, arriving to find exactly what Mrs. Patterson had described. Police vehicles, officers carrying boxes out of Wendy's house, and neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering and pointing. Detective Brennan saw me and walked over. "We have enough for embezzlement charges," she said quietly. She was withdrawing HOA funds and depositing them into personal accounts. We also found evidence that she has been paying her lawyer and several other personal expenses directly from HOA accounts using creative bookkeeping. The total looks like it is going to exceed $150,000. I felt sick. $150,000. She has been at this for longer than you thought. We pulled records going back 5 years. It started small, maybe a few hundred here and there. But once she realized nobody was paying attention, she got bolder. What happens now? She will be arraigned, probably tomorrow. Bond will be set, and then the legal process plays out. Given the amount and the duration, she is looking at felony charges. If convicted, she could face several years in prison. I watched as Wendy was led out of her house in handcuffs. Even from a distance, I could see that she looked smaller somehow, diminished. The woman who had terrorized the neighborhood with clipboards and bylaws was now just another criminal being processed by the system. Part of me felt vindicated. She had made my life difficult for months, had harassed me and wasted everyone's time with petty complaints and frivolous lawsuits. But another part of me just felt sad. What kind of desperation or greed or emptiness drives someone to steal from their neighbors? The local news picked up the story that evening. Former HOA president arrested for embezzlement ran on 3 different channels. By the next morning, it was in the newspaper and all over social media. Pine Ridge Estates became briefly famous for all the wrong reasons. The HOA held an emergency meeting the following week to address the financial situation. Amanda had finished a complete audit, and the news was grim but not catastrophic. With the missing money, the HOA was severely underfunded. But we had enough to cover immediate expenses, and there was a chance we might recover some of the stolen funds if Wendy had assets to seize. More importantly, the homeowners were united in a way they had never been before. People who had never attended a meeting before showed up. Volunteers stepped forward to help with neighborhood maintenance. There was a sense that we were all in this together, that we had survived something toxic, and were ready to build something better. Wendy's arraignment happened on a rainy Tuesday in late April. I did not attend, but Greg went to observe and reported back that she pled not guilty and was released on a $50,000 bond. Her lawyer was already talking about plea deals, which suggested they knew the evidence was overwhelming. The harassment stopped completely. No more vandalism, no more false complaints, no more mysterious property damage. It was like a cloud had lifted from the neighborhood. In May, the new HOA board held our first community event, a spring cleanup day where volunteers helped maintain the common areas and spruce up the neighborhood entrance. We had over 40 people show up, including families with kids who treated it like a party. Someone brought a grill and made hot dogs. Another person set up a lemonade stand. By the end of the day, Pine Ridge Estates looked better than it had in years, and it had not cost the HOA a dime in contractor fees. Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside as we were packing up. "You know, when you first moved in, I thought you were going to be trouble. A young single guy, that big truck, all that fire equipment in your garage. I thought you would be loud and disruptive." I laughed. "And instead, I overthrew the HOA president. You saved this neighborhood, Kevin." Wendy would have kept stealing and bullying until there was nothing left. We needed someone willing to stand up to her, and you did. I just wanted to have a Christmas bonfire. You wanted to live your life without being controlled by a petty tyrant. That is something worth fighting for. Wendy's case moved through the legal system slowly, as these things do. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal in July. She pled guilty to 3 counts of embezzlement and 1 count of fraud. In exchange for the guilty plea and an agreement to pay full restitution, the prosecutor agreed to recommend a sentence of 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 2 years. The sentencing hearing was in August. This time I did attend, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Mrs. Patterson and Amanda. Wendy looked different, older, tired, defeated. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood and spoke in a voice I barely recognized. I want to apologize to the residents of Pine Ridge Estates. I betrayed your trust, and I misused funds that belonged to all of you. There is no excuse for what I did. I started taking small amounts when I was struggling financially, and it escalated from there. I convinced myself that I deserved it because of all the work I was doing for the HOA, but that was just me lying to myself. I am truly sorry. The judge was unmoved. Mrs. Kramer, you did not just steal money, you abused a position of trust. You used your authority to hide your crimes and intimidate anyone who questioned you. The victims in this case are your neighbors, people who trusted you to act in their best interests. I am sentencing you to 4 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections, with credit for time served. You will also be required to pay full restitution of $147,000, plus interest and court costs. You have 10 days to report to the facility. And just like that, it was over. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the ordeal was finally done, satisfaction that justice had been served, but also a lingering sadness at what a waste it all had been. Wendy could have been a good HOA president if she had focused on serving the community instead of controlling it. She could have made a positive difference. Instead, she threw away her freedom and her reputation for money that was never really hers to take. The HOA used the restitution money to rebuild the reserve fund and make some much-needed improvements to the common areas. We repaved the roads, upgraded the community center, and installed new lighting at the neighborhood entrance. We also rewrote the bylaws completely, creating a system with more oversight, term limits, and regular financial audits. By the time December rolled around again, Pine Ridge Estates had transformed. The neighborhood felt different, lighter. People were friendlier, more engaged. There was a sense of community that had not existed before, and of course, I hosted my annual Christmas Eve bonfire. This time, I sent out formal invitations to the entire neighborhood. I made sure to note all the safety precautions and invited anyone who wanted to inspect the setup to come by early. Mrs. Patterson helped organize a potluck element, with neighbors bringing dishes to share. The turnout was incredible. Over 70 people showed up at various points throughout the evening. Kids ran around in the snow, adults swapped stories and jokes, and the fire blazed warm and bright against the cold December night. At one point, standing by the fire with a cup of hot cider in my hand, watching my neighbors laugh and enjoy themselves, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what I had wanted all along, not to cause trouble or overthrow anyone. Just to live my life, enjoy simple pleasures like a winter bonfire, and be part of a real community. Derek came up beside me, handing me a fresh cup of cider. You know, a year ago, if someone told me that your Christmas bonfire would lead to an HOA president getting arrested for embezzlement, I would have said they were crazy. If someone had told me that a year ago, I would have agreed with them. Do you think it was worth it? All the hassle, the harassment, the stress. I thought about it for a moment, watching the sparks rise up into the snowy night sky. Yeah, I think it was. Not because I wanted any of this to happen, but because standing up to bullies is always worth it. Wendy was not just controlling me. She was controlling everyone, stealing from everyone, making everyone's lives worse. If my bonfire was the thing that finally exposed her, then I am glad I lit it. Marcus joined us, his kids still running around despite the late hour. I heard the new board is already planning a neighborhood 4th of July party. Seems like this place is finally turning into a real community. That is the idea. HOAs do not have to be enemies. They can actually be good for neighborhoods if they are run by people who care about the community instead of power. The party went late into the night, finally winding down around 11. As people left, almost everyone made a point to thank me for hosting. Not just for the bonfire, but for everything that had come after it. For standing up to Wendy, for pushing for the election, for uncovering the embezzlement. I did not think of myself as a hero. I was just a guy who wanted to have a Christmas bonfire and did not want to be pushed around. But if that had made a positive difference in 68 families' lives, then I would take it. Cleaning up after everyone left, I found a handwritten note tucked under one of the water coolers. It was from a couple who lived at the far end of the neighborhood, people I had only met a few times. Thank you for giving us our neighborhood back. For the first time since we moved in, we feel like we actually belong here. Merry Christmas. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket. Then I made sure the fire was completely out, checked all the equipment, and headed inside to my warm house. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to fresh snow and a peaceful quiet. I made coffee, called my parents in Wyoming, and settled in for a lazy day of football and leftovers. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. The board wanted me to thank you again for everything you did this year. You are a good neighbor and a good man. I texted back a simple thank you, then put my phone away. As I sat there, looking out at the snow-covered neighborhood, I thought about how much had changed in 1 year. How a simple bonfire had set off a chain of events that transformed an entire community. How one person's refusal to back down had exposed years of corruption and abuse. But mostly, I thought about how glad I was to live in a place where people looked out for each other now. Where the HOA was a force for good instead of fear. Where neighbors were friends instead of strangers hiding from an angry woman with a clipboard. A year ago, Wendy Kramer had pressed her face against my window and threatened to call the police over a bonfire. She had meant it as intimidation, as a show of power. Instead, it had been the beginning of the end for her reign of petty tyranny. And for me, it had been the beginning of finding a real home in Pine Ridge Estates. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stand your ground, follow the rules, and let the truth speak for itself. It might take time, it might be stressful, and it might lead you places you never expected to go. But in the end, doing the right thing has a way of working out. I spent the rest of that Christmas day in peaceful contentment, knowing that the next year would be better. That the neighborhood would continue to heal and grow. That the new HOA board would serve the community instead of ruling it. And that next December, when I lit my annual Christmas bonfire, there would be no angry woman with a clipboard threatening to call the cops. Just neighbors, friends, family, and the warm glow of flames against the winter snow.